Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where we discuss leading political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, US President Donald Trump and General Secretary Xi Jinping spoke on the phone on Thursday, yesterday, agreeing to resume high-level trade negotiations after weeks of escalating tensions over tariffs, rare earth mineral shipments, and broader strategic frictions. The 90-minute call marked a critical juncture in US-China relations, with Trump declaring afterwards that the trade ties with China had gotten, quote, a little off track, end quote, but were now, quote, in very good shape, end quote. Trump said new talks would begin shortly at a yet-to-be-announced location, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer leading the American delegation. The most immediate issue is the flow of rare earth magnets, vital to U.S. industries, from electric vehicles to defense systems. Trump said that both sides, quote, straightened out some of the points, end quote, related to these critical materials, raising hopes on Wall Street that the fragile truce struck last month in Geneva might hold, at least temporarily. However, equity markets reacted cautiously with limited gains as investors remained skeptical. Quote, this is very complex stuff and we straightened it out, end quote, Trump told reporters, adding, quote, mostly rare earth magnets and some other things, end quote. We will return to rare earths shortly. Obviously, with this development, as we discussed in Wednesday's video, the rumors of Xi's removal and disappearance appear once again to be false. Former U.S. trade official Wendy Cutler noted the call appeared to break an impasse, but warned that, quote, expectations for the trade talks should be low, end quote, especially given how quickly tensions re-emerged after the Geneva truce. U.S. officials have complained that China has yet to deliver on commitments to expedite export licenses for critical minerals. Xi, for his part, invited Trump and the First Lady to visit China, with Trump confirming he reciprocated the gesture. No visit dates were announced, but speculation is growing that Trump might attend the September 3rd military parade in Beijing, marking the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, a potential stabilizer in the volatile relationship. The Chinese readout of the call was notably more guarded. It emphasized that the discussion was initiated at Trump's request and that Xi urged Washington to remove, quote, negative measures, end quote, imposed on China. She reiterated that Beijing had honored the terms of the Geneva Agreement, even as U.S. agencies report delays in the resumption of rare earth shipments. She also issued a stern warning on Taiwan, telling Trump that Washington must, quote, handle the Taiwan question with prudence, end quote, and avoid letting separatist forces, to use their language, drag the two parties into conflict. Lutnick's addition to the U.S. negotiating team signals a potential pivot in talks towards sensitive issues like export controls on advanced technology. During a congressional hearing earlier on Thursday, he accused China of attempting to, quote, steal technology, end quote, to surpass the US in AI and aviation, adding, quote, they are working with the central government to beat us so that they will have intellectual supremacy, end quote. Meanwhile, Trump appeared to soften his stance on Chinese students in the United States, saying they are, quote, welcome, end quote, and calling their presence, quote, an honor, end quote, despite recent visa revocations and proposed restrictions. The shift may be aimed at cooling diplomatic tensions as China continues to see education exchange as a key area of soft power and economic cooperation. Notably, the phone call was the first known formal contact between the two leaders since Trump's return to the White House following a previous discussion in January. Trump has long insisted that only direct talks with Xi can resolve the two nations' differences, though Xi has historically preferred negotiations through established diplomatic channels. Still, many details remain unresolved. Trump did not clarify whether Beijing had agreed to immediately resume shipments of rare earth magnets, or whether the US would lift restrictions on key industrial exports such as ethane. Analysts suggest that without quick movement on both fronts, the current détente may prove short-lived. Observers also recall how trade negotiations under Trump's first term resulted in the 2020 Phase 1 deal, reached only after more than 18 months of talks and tit-for-tat tariffs, both sides now seeking to revive a fragile accord. History may repeat itself. For now, the path forward appears cautiously open. Whether the path leads to sustained peace or another round of disruption remains uncertain. Because rare earths is quite central to this dispute, it is worth looking at this space in more detail. With Beijing tightening export controls on these critical components, the scramble to secure magnet supply has reached crisis levels, threatening factory shutdowns and exposing deep vulnerabilities in global supply chains. Rare earth magnets, essential to electric motors in both traditional and electric vehicles, are now at the center of a supply chain standoff. According to the Wall Street Journal, US-based Wall Street Journal, some automakers are weighing options such as producing electric motors in China or shipping US-made motors there for final assembly. Since China's restrictions apply only to magnets themselves, not finished parts, quote, if you can demonstrate that the magnet is in a motor in China, you can do that, end quote, said one supply chain manager. China, which processes over 90% of the world's rare earths, has rolled out a national tracking system for magnet exports, requiring more disclosure from companies, heightening scrutiny and delays. The EU has responded with concern, with the EU Trade Commissioner warning that European industry could grind to a halt without immediate solutions. At the same time, the European Chamber of Commerce in China reports that thousands of export license applications have overwhelmed Beijing's bureaucracy, leaving some companies without critical materials. Others have balked at providing sensitive IP to meet license requirements. In Germany, suppliers for major automakers have already suspended operations due to shortages. The geopolitical backdrop adds more tension. As Daniel Rosen of Rhodium Group notes, China invested heavily in rare earths, while the US, quote, horribly underestimated, end quote, future demand. For the West, the crisis is a wake-up call. As the European Commissioner puts it, quote, the export bans increase our will to diversify, end quote. But alternative supply chains could take years and massive investment, leaving industries exposed in the meantime. Next up, a leading Chinese economist's dire warning on the state of the Chinese economy. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you want to continue to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on this massive country as we move into a new period of more uncertainty and risk, subscribe to China Update, hit the bell notification icon, and you'll be on top of the most up-to-date analysis. This channel also primarily relies on subscriber support to keep going, so if you want to help keep the channel sustainable, free and open for all every day of the week, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below. Thank you so much. Next up, Zhou Tianyong, a prominent Chinese economist and director of the Dongbei University of Finance and Economics, argues that China's long-term economic growth hinges on sweeping industrial reform, without which it is the end of China's growth story. In a recent study published in the Journal of Finance and Economic Theory, Zhou introduces an economic model that quantifies the impact of institutional change, an element he says is overlooked in traditional Western models. According to Zhou, if China undertakes bold, sweeping, and politically painful reforms, its economy could grow at an average rate of 5.5% annually from 2025 through 2035. Without these reforms, however, growth will collapse to around 1%. If lucky, with China's low levels of per capita GDP, this would be catastrophic for the country and its people and throw its system into years of stagnation or worse. Key reforms proposed by Zhou include lifting household registration restrictions to enable labor mobility, reforming land and housing markets to make property rights tradable and mortgageable, and restructuring state-owned enterprises to introduce private capital and improve efficiency. He also calls for the redistribution of rural land revenues to farmers and a significant rise in household income share of GDP. These would be massive reforms and would result in the state and party giving up a lot of power. Zhou's analysis, shared in a speech hosted by the Shanghai Development Research Foundation, highlights China's demographic challenges such as a rapidly aging population and declining birth rate. He notes that China's strict one-child policy has intensified these trends, resulting in a shrinking workforce and mounting pressure on social security systems. China's economic history, Zhou observes, underscores the vital role institutional reform has played. Between 1978 and 2010, reforms boosted productivity and lifted GDP growth to 10% despite slower capital accumulation. In contrast, large-scale state investments and intervention in the private economy since 2009 have failed to yield similar results, due in large part to massive inefficiencies. Zhou also envisions a more urbanized and consumer-driven China by 2035, with higher car ownership, improved housing, and a rise in household consumption, from 30% to 55% of GDP. Regular viewers will know that this is central to China's structural imbalances and slowdown. He advocates lowering the state's investment share while increasing private sector participation and transfer payments in areas like education and healthcare. The message is clear. Sustained growth depends not on incremental tweaks, but on a transformative shift in how China governs land, labor, and capital. Quote, "There is no other way but reform," end quote. Zhou concludes, but the party's history proves one thing. It will always choose power over economic growth. And if it does so again, it means the end of China's growth story. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I will either see you over the weekend or for a new week of updates on Monday.